was like, oh, if I'd have known that.
And it's even hilarious when you talk because it's right where your mouth is. It's excellent. Oh my gosh, I love it. My husband would love that as a giant Star Wars fan.
With my dad, he was the best thing in the world, you know. My brother had lots of bouts of depression. I don't know if he was scared to ask for help. I think people need to learn to break the silence. If it wasn't for Joni Ernst increasing our telehealth and mental health services, we wouldn't have the support we need. I think it's going to save a lot of lives.
I'm Joni Ernst, and I approve this message.
Finally today, if you want a private place to pop the question, you can't beat this.
It's an underwater engagement. Cody Workman and Kelly Castile were snorkeling in Jamaica when he popped the question. Kelly can't believe this is really happening. Congratulations.
The couple plans to get married next year above the water. That's Inside Edition for today. I'm Deborah Norville. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
The 3rd District. Businesses under pressure. Declining crop prices. An ongoing pandemic. Congresswoman Cindy Axne and former Republican Congressman David Young lay out their plans for Iowa's 3rd District. KCCI is teaming up with the Des Moines Register to get their answers on issues that matter most to you.
See how their experience in Washington will help them advocate for Iowans.
KCCI Commitment 2020, Iowa 3rd District Congressional Debate, tonight at 7 p.m.
An annual mammogram is still the best way to detect breast cancer early. See why more women choose Iowa Radiology. Their focus is our good health.
Not only did Joni Ernst vote for it, she helped write the bill herself. Listed right there as an original co-sponsor, Ernst co-authored a bill that would let insurers deny Iowans coverage for pre-existing conditions. But Ernst didn't stop there. She took over $500,000 from Big Pharma and insurance and opposed a bipartisan effort to lower drug prices. We've got it in writing. We can't trust Joni Ernst with our health care. DSCC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Hi, I'm Scott Cirksena. I grew up right here in West Des Moines, the youngest of 5 boys in a house with 1 bathroom. My mother is a saint. I learned early on that if you want something, whether it was your laundry or a new bike, you have to work for it. I got my first job at 14. I've been working ever since. Today, we're facing some serious challenges. It's on us to find solutions. We can fix our economy, strengthen schools, and improve mental health. It will take some work, and I know how to work. I'm Scott Cirksena, and I'm asking for your vote.
My name's Bob Bjorholm, and this is my wife, Denise. I thank God for the fact that we had Social Security and Medicare. I don't really know where I would be today. We're worried that Randy Feenstra will cut Medicare and Social Security, or he will privatize it like he did Medicaid. We support J.D. Schulten. He will fight for us. We know because he's been to every town in the district, and when he came by Battle Creek, he told us himself.
I'm J.D. Schulten, and I approve this message.
Get the KCCI forecast with Ken, Colleen, and Kurt on Star 102.5.
You're watching a KCCI 8 News Des Moines Register Commitment 2020 special, 3rd District Debate.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this Commitment 2020 debate between the candidates for Iowa's 3rd Congressional District. I'm Steve Carlin with KCCI 8 News. My co-moderator tonight is Stephen Gruber Miller, the political and state house reporter for the Des Moines Register.
Tonight, we'll ask a mix of questions on the issues Iowans care about most. Let's meet the candidates. Joining us is Democratic U.S. Representative Cindy Axne. Congresswoman Axne beat her challenger 2 years ago to represent the 3rd District. She grew up in Des Moines and worked in state government for 10 years. Cindy Axne is running for her 2nd term.
Republican David Young is running again to take back his old seat. The former representative served District 3 from 2014 to 2018 when he lost re-election to Representative Axne. Young grew up in Van Meter and graduated from Drake University. He's also the former chief of staff to Senator Chuck Grassley.
The candidates hope to represent Iowa's 3rd congressional district, which makes up the southwest corner of the state.
It's a diverse district that covers 16 counties. It includes the cities of Des Moines and Council Bluffs, as well as communities in southwestern Iowa that reach to the Missouri state line.
Now for the rules of tonight's debate. Candidates will get 60 seconds to answer a question. If a candidate is mentioned by their opponent, they'll get 30 seconds to respond once. Time cues will come from colored lights. The yellow light indicates 10 seconds remain. The red light indicates time is up. Each candidate will get 60 seconds at the end of the debate for a closing statement.
First of all, we'd like to thank you both very much for taking part tonight. A coin flip has determined that Representative Young will go first. So Representative Young, here we go. Here's your first question. Voters made a distinct choice in 2018 to elect Cindy Axne over you. Why are you running again?
Well, there's a lot left to do in Washington, D.C., and we need to make sure that we have strong leadership there to get the job done. My opponent campaigned as a moderate, middle-of-the-road kind of candidate, a problem solver, but once she got in there, she started voting 95% of the time with Nancy Pelosi, and that's not where this district is. I have a record of effective leadership for Iowa, making sure Iowans could make decisions about the quality of life on their own when it came to keeping more of their hard-earned dollars through tax relief. My opponent has vowed to repeal the 2017 tax relief and raise taxes on Iowans, cutting in half the child tax credit. Our agriculture communities, and I'm blessed to be endorsed by the Iowa Farm Bureau, know that David Young has their back. There's a lot left to do. I'm in it to win it, and making sure that we give the quality of life that Iowans deserve and the liberties that they prize, and keep them safe as well.
Thank you, Representative Young. Representative Axne, when you won your race in 2018, you only carried Polk County. If you can only win in Polk County, are you the best person to represent the entire district?
Well, thank you for that question, Stephen, and grateful to be here with you and Steve. I am intending on upping the margins across this district. I've been working hard to make sure that every single person in this district has a voice in Washington. I meant it when I said it. I don't care what zip code you come from. Every single person in Iowa's 3rd district deserves to have somebody stand up for them in Washington. It's why I've spent my tenure going out to visit every single county. I was named the most accessible freshman member of Congress because I held almost 60 town halls in my first year in office, and I continue to do so virtually to make sure I reach out to every single person across this district. I think what I represent is the hardworking people in this district, our families. As a mom of 2 boys myself and a small business owner, I understand the struggles that our families are facing. So I'm bringing their voices with me to Washington. And unlike my opponent, I have made sure to bring things home to the people here in our state to protect our agriculture community, but to also grow opportunity for every single person across this district.
Thank you, Representative. President Trump will hold a rally in Des Moines on Wednesday, less than 2 weeks after announcing he's tested positive for COVID-19. This one's for Representative Young. Do you think the president should be holding an event in Des Moines this week?
Well, we're 22 days out from the election, and so it's natural that both candidates for president are going to be out there wanting to get in front of the people. He recently tested consecutively negative for COVID-19, and so I'm just hoping that the proper protocols will be put out there to make sure that, you know, there's masks, people are distanced, but people are volunteering to go to these events, and so they're not being forced to. And so it's no doubt that the president wants to spend some time in Iowa and put out his message to make sure that people know why he should be elected.
Will you be attending, Representative?
I do plan on attending, yeah.
Okay. Representative Axne, same question.
Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, we're seeing cases rise here in Polk County, so it's reckless for the president to come into my district, our state, and put people at risk. The CDC and the Trump administration, the doctors within that, the medical scientists all say that you should not be gathering in large groups. We need to be social distancing, we need to be wearing masks, and we need to be staying out of large rallies like this. By the president coming here to the state, what he shows me is a carelessness and a recklessness towards the people that I care for in our state. And I'm surprised that my opponent, who's standing next to me, would even attend this rally, knowing how dangerous it is for Iowans to attend it. I'll do everything I can to make sure people don't go, because it puts too many people in harm's way as we continue to see more deaths and more cases in Iowa.
All right, last week.
She mentioned my name. Do I get a chance to respond?
Okay, yes you do. I'm sorry, you get 30 seconds.
Yeah, well, she mentioned that this is her district. This is not her district. This is the district of the people in 16 counties here in central southwest Iowa. And then she said she's going to do everything she can to keep people from moving about freely and going to this event. There's a real difference here between my opponent and myself. I'm for freedom making sure people have the best information possible, and making sure that if they want, they can manage their own risk.
Representative Young, thank you very much. Last week, President Trump said Congress should stop negotiating on a new stimulus and then reversed himself. Representative Young, do you believe there is still a chance for a broader stimulus deal before the election? And if not, why not?
I hope there's still a chance. I hope there's still a chance because Iowa needs help. A lot of our small businesses need help. When it comes to child care help for our families, when it comes to our hospital workers and healthcare workers, they need help. When it comes to our schools, they need help as well. And we need some liability protections as well for those who are doing the right thing but fear lawsuits. Nancy Pelosi, who my opponent voted for, and who she votes with 95% of the time, they're not serious about getting into a deal. They're not serious at all. They've been playing with these outrageous numbers. I think there's a common sense solution here where you can start with a smaller number but very, very targeted at what the need is. You can always grow that number with another package when it comes along. But I hope there's a chance because Iowans need it.
Representative Axne, do you still believe there's a chance for a stimulus deal?
I think there is a chance, and as a matter of fact, I just found out this morning as the leader put us on notice that to October we should be ready for a vote. I don't think it's coming this week, unfortunately. We were moving down the right direction. Just before the president announced to pull out from any discussions, I had been on a caucus call where the speaker had said conversations were going very well with Secretary Mnuchin, that documents were being passed back and forth, and it was the president who shut this down. The American public, the Iowans, and people in the 3rd District need all the help that they can get. My job is to make sure that their families have opportunity. We did a great job in making sure that we came together in multiple packages. I'm sad to see that we can't find an opportunity for the Republicans to come to the table to work with us to make sure that we get money in the hands of the people who need it. They're stuck on this business of not supporting state and local funding. We need to support our state and local municipalities to ensure we do support our teachers, our police officers, our firefighters, and more. So I'm going to keep pushing for a package.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Young, health care was a major issue in the 2018 campaign. This year, 1 week after the election, the Supreme Court will hear a lawsuit seeking to strike down the Affordable Care Act. If the court strikes down the law, what should Congress replace it with?
Well, thank you for the question, a very important one, because health care is an issue that I hear about all across the district. I don't think the Supreme Court is going to strike the health care law down. If they find portions of it that are unconstitutional, maybe they'll take those pieces out, but I think what was really the issue was the individual mandate, which got taken care of and got repealed. Listen, we need to make sure that first and foremost, those with pre-existing conditions are protected. I've lost 2 cousins from cancer. I have an uncle with diabetes who've lost both legs, an aunt with MS, other family members with pre-existing conditions. And first and foremost, we need to make sure that those with pre-existing conditions are protected. That can be a base bill to repair the Affordable Care Act. It's not perfect, and both sides have said so, and then add on some new provisions that can bring down prices, improve the quality of care, and access as well. And I'll be at the table to do that.
Okay, thank you, Representative Young. To follow up on that, you had said that you don't believe the court will strike down the entire law. What is your position on what the court should do? Would you like to see the entire law struck down?
I don't know what the court's going to do, but I know that what Congress should do, and Congress should come together and fix the current health care problem that we have in the United States, and that's primarily dealing with cost and bring costs down. We need to make sure that we have price transparency when it comes to pricing in health care. When you do that, you can be a better shopper with your health care dollars. We need to make sure that those on the Affordable Care Act, where the subsidies have been given to insurance companies, those subsidies should go directly to the people who are on the Affordable Care Act to make sure that they're empowered with their health care dollars to better negotiate and hold providers accountable too. There's a lot that we can do. I think there's a lot of common sense bipartisan consensus. I wish we could get to that and I'd be at the table.
All right, Representative Axne, the Affordable Care Act has been law for the past decade, and health insurance premiums continue to rise. How do you plan to bring down the price of health insurance?
Well, this is something that I've been working on, Steve, since I started my job, and I'm happy to say that Democrats within the House have made health care a priority. The Republicans have been trying to dismantle the Affordable Care Act since its inception, and they've had years to bring to the table something that they say is better, but they've yet to do that. But all they've done is vote to take away coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. My opponent voted against Iowans. He told Iowans he would vote to protect them. In the middle of the night, he changed his vote and voted against them. He voted to take away coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. He voted to raise premiums on Iowans, especially older Iowans, by 5 times more. He voted to kick kids off their parents' plans up to age 26. And we've got to address all of these issues to make sure that we have affordable, quality health care for every single person in this country. I know the ACA isn't perfect. It's why 2 of the pieces of legislation that I wrote address this, to take away some of the costs and put it back into people's pockets, like taking away the Cadillac tax as well as a health insurance tax, so that we could help Iowans save money when it comes to health insurance.
All right. Also, to follow up, Representative Axne, Republicans have said rural hospitals would suffer under a public option.
She mentioned my name, Steve,
Okay.
and I've got the ability to respond if she mentions my name.
Okay, go ahead. I only heard my opponent, but go ahead.
Well, I am her opponent. The pre-existing condition issue, there's one person on this stage who's introduced 3 pieces of legislation to help those with pre-existing conditions. And one of them got passed, an amendment to the Republican health care bill to make sure that those with pre-existing conditions are protected. Just because you are critical of the Affordable Care Act, and you have been as well, Congresswoman, doesn't mean you oppose protecting those pre-existing conditions. It's the foray into what I want to get done on health care, to protect those with pre-existing conditions.
All right, Congressman Young, just to be clear, my opponent does not count. It has to be by name. So she will have to say Congressman Young. You would have to say Congresswoman Axne. So my follow-up question to you, Congresswoman Axne, Republicans have said rural hospitals would suffer under a public option. What specific policy proposals do you support to protect Iowa's rural hospitals?
Yeah, well, once again, this is misleading and just not true, just like my opponent who said he covers people with pre-existing conditions, but it did everything he possibly could to take away health coverage for people with pre-existing conditions, and that's a part of his history that can't be erased. A public option has been tested as far as what it would do to help people. First and foremost, it will save our country billions of dollars. Some of the best think tanks in the country that deal with medical costs and how we're going to help address this issue across this country say we'll save billions over each year, and some as high as $1 trillion over a decade. So a public option will in no way, shape, or form take away from our rural hospitals. And as a matter of fact, I have written bills to protect our rural hospitals. And recently during COVID, I made sure that we covered the reimbursement gap rate, because our rural hospitals don't get reimbursed at the same rate as some of our urban hospitals do. So I have written multiple bills to make sure that we allow them to have as much access as other hospitals do.
Congressman Young, this question is for the both of you, but Congressman Young, I'd like you to answer this first. If the Supreme Court strikes down the entire Affordable Care Act, it could invalidate Iowa's Medicaid expansion, which serves more than 169,000 low-income Iowans. If that happens, what should Congress do, Congressman Young, to ensure those people can maintain their coverage?
If the Supreme Court does that, we should introduce, across party lines, a bipartisan bill to make sure that those with pre-existing conditions are protected, and those who are on Medicaid have the confidence in knowing that their health care is going to be covered. That's a bipartisan issue, a lot of bipartisan issues as well. And as well, my opponent talks a lot of bills she's written and committees that she's on and caucuses she's on and letters she's written, but none of that's getting done. It's important to realize that a lot of things get introduced in Congress but doesn't get done, but I do believe, I know this, that there's a bipartisan consensus out there. We got to put politics aside, quit demagoguing these issues, because saying people don't care about one another in Iowa is not leading. That is not leading at all. That's scaring people.
All right, Congressman Young, thank you very much. Congresswoman Axne, same question. If the Affordable Care Act goes, it would invalidate Medicaid expansion for more than 169,000 low-income Iowans. What should Congress do to ensure that those people have coverage?
Well, we need to make sure that we've got a plan ready to go from the get-go if this should happen. We're fighting right now to make sure that it doesn't. The last thing that we need to see right now during COVID is people's health care taken away. One of the things that I fought for and we're continuing to fight for in the next COVID package is to make sure that folks can sign up for ACA during this process when they've lost their insurance. So we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure that we're keeping people healthy. I've always said that I'm for shoring up the ACA and introducing a public option so people can buy into Medicare or Medicaid to make sure that we can continue to cover those folks with Medicaid expansion. I will continue to support that position. I believe it's our fastest way to make sure everyone has affordable quality coverage in their own backyard. It will force us to have competitive pricing so that everybody can afford what they need, and those who want to buy into Medicare or Medicaid have that option.
Thank you, Representative. I want to turn to the economy now. Representative Axne, what is the most important economic challenge the federal government will face when we emerge from the pandemic?
Certainly getting families back up on their feet and protecting our small businesses. We have seen way too many businesses fall by the wayside during this pandemic. I'm grateful for the work that we've been able to accomplish within the House, and our small businesses are very pleased with what the Paycheck Protection Program did to help them. But it's not enough. And unfortunately, we're stalled because the Senate refuses to come to the table with a bill that we can all get behind. Secretary Mnuchin actually brought something that we started to work on. And so we're going to continue to push to make sure that we're helping those small businesses. Our small businesses, and I'm a small business owner myself, create the vast majority of jobs in this country. So that's first and foremost. We've got to make sure they stay afloat. Secondly, we are at grave risk of losing childcare in this state. We already had childcare deserts to begin with, and now we've seen 40% of our childcare businesses close. We need to make sure that our parents can get back to work and their children can go to a childcare in a safe setting. And so those are two major issues that we need to address.
Thank you. Representative Young, the same question for you. What is the most important economic challenge the federal government will have to deal with emerging from the pandemic?
Yeah, it's getting people back to work, and we're opening up our economy here in Iowa, and we need to continue to do that. At the same time, we need to make sure that we take this virus seriously, because it is serious. It has killed people that I know. It has killed people other Iowans know. But I'm hearing some really interesting things here today from my opponent. She campaigned in 2018 to repeal the 2017 tax relief, which doubled the child tax credit for families, which reduced taxes on small businesses and farmers and hardworking Iowans. And so she wants to raise taxes, and at the same time, she wrote our governor, Kim Reynolds, and said, shut down Iowa, do a shelter in place. Poverty is a killer. My opponent wants to have the federal government take more of Iowa's taxes, and she wants to shut down Iowa.
Okay, well, thank you both very much. Our debate with the candidates in Iowa's 3rd Congressional District is just getting started. Up next, we'll discuss the movement for social and racial justice.
The candidates will also have a chance to ask each other a question. Stay with us.
Watching Andy Griffith has one result.
Makes you feel good, don't it? You know why you're feeling that way, don't you, boy?
'Cause I'm pooped.
This election is bigger than debates and bombshells. At KCCI, we know the most important moments are the ones that impact you and shape your family's future. Our commitment to go deeper than the division and understand what platforms and promises mean for our community. For this election and as we move forward together, KCCI Commitment 2020. Facts, accountability, and local reporting in every newscast from Iowa's news leader.
There's no place in the world like Iowa. This is a place where hard work, decency, and resilience is not just how we are, but who we are. The last few years have brought great changes and challenges. I swore a new oath to protect this great country. I packed my daughter off to West Point, and I came forward as a survivor of sexual assault. So no woman ever has to go through what I did. I've added a few years and some gray hair, but through it all, I've been inspired by you. When the floodwaters rise, so too does Iowa. When the storms hit home, Iowa fights back together. Our challenges may change, but one thing never will. Iowa is the greatest place in America to call home. I'm Joni Ernst, and I approve this message.
Iowa needs someone fighting for us, not the special interest.
Washington changed Joni Ernst.
On health care, Ernst voted 4 times to let insurance companies deny coverage for pre-existing conditions.
There's too much money in politics.
It's true. Ernst has taken over $500,000 from big drug and insurance interests.
Ernst works for the powerful special interest now, not Iowa.
Every time Joni Ernst sells out to the corporate special interests, she's selling out Iowans like you. SMP is responsible for the content of this ad.
Welcome back to our debate with the candidates running for Congress in Iowa's 3rd District, Representatives Cindy Axne and David Young.
We're going to start out with the state of politics in our country right now. Both of you have served in Congress and talk about working across the aisle. Representative Young, please give us an example of when you broke from your party on an issue of substantial importance to Iowans.
There was a vote that gave leeway for businesses and other groups to not comply with the American with Disabilities Act. And I voted against that to make sure that those who with disabilities aren't discriminated against. And so there's an example there. I've bucked my party plenty when it was time to take up the health care bill and there wasn't support for pre-existing conditions in it. I said this is a problem. And what did I do? I rolled up my sleeve with some other members and we got an amendment to take care of those with pre-existing conditions. When we didn't do a budget, I did no budget, no pay, and I didn't take a paycheck. And so those are some opportunities there that came up on the horizon, and I took them to make sure that I showed Iowa I was an independent voice.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Axne, same question. When have you broken with your party on an issue of importance to Iowans?
Well, thank you, Stephen, because I think sometimes we throw the term bipartisan around, but most people don't actually practice it. I was named by the United States Chamber of Commerce the most bipartisan member of Iowa's congressional delegation. 47% of the bills that I have written have been with a Republican co-lead. 83% of the bills that I have been a co-sponsor on have been bipartisan. And I do everything I possibly can to make sure that we get the job done, and that means doing things that are bipartisan. But it does mean that I stand up for when Iowa needs to make sure that we're stepping up against my party leadership. And that happened twice now, when my party leadership did not want to include aid for our farmers in the end-of-year budget discussions, and that's just not acceptable. I stood up, I got my Midwest colleagues together, and I told the Speaker, we will not vote for this continuing resolution unless you put aid in for our farmers. In the end, she did, and I made sure that our farmers were made whole against all of the destruction that they faced because of this current administration.
Thank you, Representative. This question is for both of you. We'll give it to Representative Young first. President Trump was asked in September if he would commit to a peaceful transition of power after the election. He said, quote, "We're going to have to see what happens." Representative Young, what's your reaction to that response?
There will be a peaceful transition of power, and my expectation is that the president is going to be reelected, and so there'll be a peaceful transition of power in 2024.
Okay, Congresswoman Axne, your response to that statement by President Trump?
I think it's just another example of how divisive this president has been for this country. And it's why we've seen so many disruptions over the last few years under his leadership. It's time that this president goes and that we find somebody who will truly unite our country in the form of Joe Biden. And when he makes a statement like that, what he does is say he's above the law. There is no one that's above the law, and that includes the president. And that kind of statement is unacceptable. It's beneath the dignity of the office, and in no way, shape, or form is that something that he should be saying. We've got to make sure that we have a smooth transition of power to ensure that we protect our republic and we hold our democratic values true for this country. We need to see leadership out of the Oval Office, not what we're seeing for the years with this president's tweets and his incessant divisiveness to divide this country into rural versus urban, Republican versus Democrat. We're better than that. And this president needs to be showing much more leadership than he has.
Congresswoman Axne, turning the discussion over to racial inequality in the United States. Protests for racial justice have taken place across the nation this summer, including in the 3rd Congressional District. What was your personal reaction, Congresswoman Axne, to this summer's protests, and how should protesters' demands for racial justice in policing and other areas of government be addressed in Congress?
Let me say first and foremost that I do not support defunding the police, contrary to what's out there for many of us Democrats. And as a matter of fact, we want to provide more funding. I want to provide more funding for our police officers, which is why I wrote an amendment that passed with unanimous support to increase funding for the Violence Against Women's Act. It's why in the House we put together a bill to make sure that we protect our citizens, but also our officers with the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to ensure that the bad actors were held accountable, but that there was appropriate training for our officers, and certainly that we took away things like chokeholds and anything that would put people in harm's way when they're involved with police interaction. Listen, I'm not happy to see anybody destroy property. That's unacceptable. I certainly protect people's right of freedom of speech, and that's one thing that I will always support, but destroying people's property is not the way to make this happen.
Congresswoman Axne, very quickly, your personal reaction to what we all saw on TV with the protests this summer.
Yeah, that I was disappointed that too many people were approaching this from the wrong perspective, destroying property, looting and hurting each other. I was grateful to see so many young people in particular stand up and push for what they think is important for this country. So listen, folks need to have a voice in our democracy, and I'm glad to see anytime people want to step up and do what they think is right.
Congressman Young, same question. How should protesters' demands for racial justice and in policing and other areas of government be addressed by Congress?
Well, first of all, I think we need to address it here in our community, and it was very helpful to see that our state legislature came together bipartisan fashion to pass some provisions that would help. I want to make sure that policing is primarily done at the local level. If there's some areas that the federal government can do, then I'll be at the table. I remember the First Step Act that we passed while I was a member of Congress to make sure that we dealt in a serious way with the racial disparities that were out there in sentencing. Iowans and Americans have an incredible right called the freedom of speech, and to do so, demonstrating in a peaceful way, petitioning the government, and at the same time, we have to make sure that some nefarious characters who try to hijack that peaceful free speech, that they don't get away with it, and we have to stop the mob violence. The George Floyd Act was something that was passed by the House, but it was just too bad that my opponent didn't show up in person and vote for that bill.
Okay, Representative Young, thank you. Did you have a personal reaction as well to the protest, just like we asked Representative Axne?
I was sad. I was sad to see this in our communities, and that's why shortly thereafter I contacted some leadership in the black community, and we sat down and we had some really good conversations, and those conversations should never stop.
Okay, I want to move on to another question. Representative Young, what do you think Congress should do to support local policing initiatives?
Well, there can be some federal funds that are available. For instance, there are some funds that were available to help the Des Moines Police Department get a ballistics lab, and I helped them do that. We should also make sure that we're looking at things such as qualified immunity. We want to make sure that the law is being followed. At the same time, we don't want to inhibit officers from doing what they think is right and maybe not doing it and causing a situation to get worse. We need to make sure that there's a database, if not done here in Iowa, maybe the 50 states can come together, but probably a national database to make sure that those law enforcement officers who are bad actors can't just go around to other communities and police again. We've got great police departments here in Iowa, some incredible law enforcement officers, and they more than anybody want the bad officers to go away.
All right, thank you, Representative. Representative Axne, the same question to you.
Yes, what should we do at the local level? Listen, the other day I sat down with the Polk County Sheriff and members of his team to talk with them about this issue, and I'll be anxious to see the new location that they're building where they've got a training center there. I think it would be important for so many people to see what our officers deal with on a regular basis to understand what their jobs truly look like. But I also think we need to make sure that we're putting pieces in place to protect citizens. I was glad to see that the Des Moines Police Department really has stepped up. They have developed training to address bias. It's something that we absolutely need to address. For far too long, black and brown communities have been subject to arrests at higher levels than white communities, and we need to make sure that we address these issues. So it's very important that we not only support our police departments and our sheriff's offices, all of our law enforcement with the resources that they need so that they can address these issues and also address mental health. They're dealing with a lot of mental health issues, and we need to make sure that they've got the resources to properly address these within our community.
Congresswoman Axne, the 3rd Congressional District, as I'm sure you know, is the most diverse in Iowa. What have you personally done to support Iowans of color?
Most recently, I held a roundtable with the Congressional Black Caucus Chair, Representative Bass, and black leaders within our community. I wanted to make sure that they understood that not only do they have a direct pipeline to me to make sure that we're discussing the issues and working from a federal, state to local level, but they also have a direct pipeline right into the Capitol with a Congressional Black Caucus, and so we established that. We're working on addressing multiple issues like systemic issues that have occurred for years within our country. Things like the inequities with pay, inequities within our education system, and certainly within our healthcare system. We have seen far too many folks from our black and brown communities, our black community in particular, die during COVID because of comorbidity rates. For far too long, they've been left behind in having affordable quality health care in their own backyard. And so we've got a lot of issues that we need to work on, and it starts by addressing the root causes behind so much of this unrest.
Congressman Young, what have you personally done to support Iowans of color?
Well, a lot of Iowans of color live in, unfortunately, areas where there's poverty. And so the opportunity zones that we passed in the 2017 tax relief bill created an opportunity for those to have investments come into their communities where there are great paying jobs. Unfortunately, my opponent wants to repeal that tax law, which created those opportunity zones. As well, I've pushed for initiatives and encouraged those at the local level to open up school choice, to allow people of every background, every economic strata, every color, to be able to send their children where they want to. It's a civil right to me to make sure that our kids can be educated in a way where they can have great opportunities then afterwards. And so parents and those kids, they get one shot. And this is very, very important to make sure that kids have choice in where they go to school with their parents.
Thank you, Representative. Turning now to immigration, families have been separated at the border under our current immigration system. Representative Young, should Congress change its immigration and asylum policies to address this in the future, and what could be done to reunite families that have been separated?
So I did vote to make sure that families were not separated at the border. That's inhumane. Kids and parents, they need to be together. This started years and years ago under the Obama administration, and it's been carried forward since, and so we need to make sure that families stay together. First and foremost, we are the greatest country in the world, and everybody wants to come here, but there's a right way to come here and a wrong way to come here. We need to look at our family unification laws and making sure that we focus just really on the nuclear family, you know, moms and sisters and kids. We need to make sure that we secure our border, and I'm for an all-of-the-above approach to securing the border. And as well, we need to make sure that we deal with dreamers in a compassionate way, and that's why I voted to allow citizenship for those dreamers who are not felons and do not have a criminal history.
Thank you, Representative Young. Representative Axne, this question also goes to you. What should Congress change the immigration and asylum policies to address family separation, and what, if anything, can be done to reunite families that have been separated?
Well, I'm a mom of 2 teenage boys, and I can't even imagine the heartbreak that our families face on the border when they are separated from their children. No parent should ever have to face that, and no child should ever be left alone without their parent. And what we've seen is absolutely unconscionable. It is a stain on our country's history. This is something we absolutely need to address. We can find opportunities to help our refugee families come in with safer places to keep their families together. I have voted for bills that would allow us to do that. where children and families could be placed together in a setting that allows them to be educated, where they're with each other, that it's a safe home-like environment. So I want to make sure that we have immigration reform that's comprehensive, not just piecemeal and not attacking a particular set of folks who are coming in through our border. We need to make sure that we're addressing all of our immigration, and that includes Customs and Border Patrol. That is making sure that we have immigration reform, dreamers become citizens, and that we have a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants without a criminal background.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next question. Some Iowa industries, including agriculture, depend heavily upon immigrant labor. Representative Young, would stricter immigration laws make it harder to find such workers?
Well, we need workers in Iowa, especially as we're coming out of the economic malaise caused by the pandemic. And so I have voted for provisions to bring in visa workers for not just agriculture, but other sectors of the economy as well. If we can't fill them with homegrown talent, then we need to look elsewhere. And so I have done that, and we need to make sure that we keep our businesses growing and our farms going. And that's why it's important to keep taxes low on our farmers, our small businesses, our larger employers, and Iowa families. Unfortunately, my opponent, again, she wants to repeal the 2017 tax relief, raising taxes on small businesses, farmers, our families, and cutting the child tax credit in half.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Axne, same question. Would stricter immigration laws make it more difficult for certain Iowa industries to find workers?
Well, since my opponent seems to have a broken record about where I sit on taxes, let me quickly address that. What I'd like to do, folks, is to make sure that you, hardworking Iowa families, get a fair shake. The tax bill that my opponent voted for gives the greatest breaks to corporations and the wealthiest among us at the expense of hardworking Iowa families. So I want to make sure that the tax plan that we have in place puts money in your pockets and helps you save for a better future. Now, we absolutely do need to look at bringing more folks in to help us in our agriculture sector. And one thing I agree with my opponent on is we need to bring more immigrants in to help us with multiple sectors that we need assistance with here in Iowa. I hear from farmers all the time. I hear from so many people, how medical in particular, how we need to bring in doctors and skilled workers. So we've got a lot of opportunities here in Iowa to help people within these areas by expanding the rules, allowing more visas and opportunities for people to come in and help us and help themselves be more economically stable.
Thank you, Representative. Let's move on to ethanol and agriculture. The Trump administration has granted dozens of refinery waivers, letting oil companies avoid blending 4 billion gallons of ethanol into gasoline. Representative Axne, should Congress end the waiver program?
Stephen, no wonder you could barely get that out. It's unconscionable what this administration has done to our agriculture industry, in particular our ethanol industry. Absolutely. Listen, we moved away from the 5 billion gallons that we're supposed to be able to sell for ethanol, and this administration hit our farmers hard by allowing over 80 waivers out of the renewable fuels program. In doing so, they took money out of the pockets of hardworking farmers to put it in the pockets of the rich shareholders of fossil fuel companies at the expense of those workers, at the expense of our economy here in the state of Iowa. I have fought for the last year and a half to make sure that we address this issue. I have opened up an investigation into the EPA's issuance of these waivers. I have stood there by our farmers to make sure that we're pushing ethanol at every possible opportunity, domestically and internationally, trying to get tariffs off of the ethanol for Brazil. We have so much work to do. If this administration would just start supporting farmers over fossil fuel, we could get somewhere.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Young, same question. Should Congress end the waiver program?
Well, we certainly shouldn't be giving waivers to refineries that are making billions in profits. That's not a hardship at all. And so I think it's ridiculous that the many waivers that have been given in what I believe to be unnecessary, and it's an abusive. I introduced legislation to bring transparency to the waiver process so we can see these companies who are asking for waivers, what really their finances are. But I'm disappointed that there's not been the commitment in law that there should be to make sure that Iowa farmers, our corn growers, our biodiesel folks get the amount that is blended into law into an actuality. And it's one thing for our farmers to take some pain when they're going up against China and trying to redo a trade agreement, but we cannot stand to go up against big oil. That is just, it's wrong.
Thank you. China has resumed buying a significant amount of pork from U.S. suppliers, but they have a long-term stated goal of pork production self-sufficiency. Representative Young, where do you see new emerging markets for Iowa's agricultural products, and what would you do in Congress to facilitate entry into those markets?
Well, we grow the best in the world, right, and produce the best in the world, and we need markets. And so there were a number of countries that were involved in the Trans-Pacific Partnership that didn't get through under President Obama. In those countries around the Pacific Rim, we have a real opportunity there. And so I wish the administration would start pushing heavily into those areas with those countries. The president doesn't like multilateral agreements, okay? I understand that, but in the meantime, push for unilateral agreements. By doing so, you strengthen the relationship that we have with those countries around the Pacific Rim, and you weaken China at the same time because they're putting their hands all over those countries in the Pacific Rim, and we want our values there, our exports there.
Thank you. Representative Axne, the same question. Where do you see new markets for ethanol products, and how would you facilitate entry into those markets?
There is so much opportunity for Iowa farmers as we move forward into this next decade. And as a matter of fact, one of the bills that I recently co-sponsored, the Growing Climate Act, will help us create a new market for our farmers through carbon sequestration. We're going to help our farmers put more nutrients back into their soil with the carbon, but also make sure that they've got a market to sell that sequestration in. Our farmers want trade, not aid, and so we've got to do everything we possibly can to make sure that we can expand that domestically. This is one of the ways to do that. In addition, we need to look at states like California, who have had some old policy on the books for quite some time now, restricting us from being able to sell as much ethanol as we would like to in states like California. Finally, we need to make sure that we promote ethanol year-round and actually make that a policy. Not just say that we're going to do it, but put it in place and make sure that we've got the resources so that those who are can accommodate the differences at the pumps so that we can actually sell this nationwide.
Representative Axne, do you know what the price of hogs was at the end of the market day on Friday?
I do not know what it was at the end of the day on Friday.
Congressman Young.
No, but I can tell you that beans were around $9.70 and corn at about $3.60.
Okay, right.
I do love bacon, though.
Thank you both. In the past several years, the 3rd District has experienced record flooding, prolonged droughts, and a derecho. Representative Young, how much of this do you believe is caused by climate change, and what can the federal government do to protect people and their livelihoods?
Yeah, well, I do believe there's climate change, and I know that because just talking to farmers every day about what they're seeing out there with the weather and the different trends over the years and seasons. And so it's very important that we address this, and we lead on this as well. In 2019, the United States reduced its carbon emissions by 140 million metric tons, leading the world over any other country out there. Doing that was done with new technologies, not mandates, incentives, and with renewable energy, which we lead right here in the heartland in Iowa, whether it's geothermal, solar, wind, biodiesel, ethanol. And so we are leading the charge right here, and we need to continue to do that, encourage other countries as well to follow our lead.
All right, Congressman, thank you very much. Just want to let you know very quickly, the price of hogs at the end of the market day on Friday, $65.40. Steve.
Yeah, thank you. Representative Axne, same question. How much of these record weather events do you believe are due to climate change, and what can the federal government do to protect people?
So much of what we're seeing, whether it's the floods here or the derecho or the wildfires that we're having out west in this country right now, is caused because of climate change. Listen, we've got to address this issue. Just last year, when we saw the worst flooding on the Missouri River than we've seen in 100 years, I had to secure $3 billion to make sure that we could address it. Almost twice as much as our senior senators were able to get on their side. Was able to label it specifically for our Midwest floods to ensure that we were covered and we made people whole again. Certainly we know that we're going to see flooding again. We know that we're going to see increased droughts. Not only is this costing us money from the perspective of taxpayer dollars to ensure that we're cleaning things up, but it's costing us market opportunity. And so we need to invest. It's why I wrote a bill, the National Climate Bank Act, to make sure that we invested billions of dollars that would be leveraged to help us get trillions of dollars of support to address climate and energy across this country. I spent a decade in the state of Iowa, and I oversaw the Energy and Environment Plan, helping to make Iowa #2 in wind production. So this is near and dear to me.
Okay, thank you both. We will allow each of you to ask each other a question.
You'll have 30 seconds to ask, and your opponent will have 1 minute to answer. Representative Axne, you can ask a question first.
David, you say that you support people with pre-existing conditions, and as a matter of fact, you say it over and over again, but the experts say that your votes are contrary to that, that your votes would actually hurt people with pre-existing conditions in Iowa and damage the health care coverage that they have. Last week, I asked you to explain why do you think you know better than the American Medical Association, the American Cancer Society, AARP, and other medical and health groups when it comes to their advocacy? Why do you know better than they do on Iowans' health care?
Those are great groups, and I've worked with them on many different issues. I was listening to the Iowans on the ground whose premiums were going up, whose deductibles were going up, who were losing their doctors. The individual market here in Iowa was nearly decimated, and we needed to do something. And the issue that was so important to me, because it's so important to so many Iowans, and you love to politicize this, every Iowan loves to make sure that their loved ones have protections to pre-existing conditions. That's first and foremost. We need to make sure the insurance companies aren't discriminating against them. We need to make sure that they're not pricing them differently. And I offered the amendment on the Republican bill, which I'm sure you didn't support, but it showed you my priority was to protect those with pre-existing conditions, and something needed to be done because Iowa's individual market is bottoming out.
Congressman Young, your turn. You get to ask Congresswoman Axne a question.
During your run in 2018 in the primary, you all talked about repealing the 2017 tax bill. That gave tax relief to small businesses, individuals. It doubled the child tax credit. It helped Iowa workers, and they've told me that that has helped them very, very much. I don't understand why you would want to put the burden down on Iowans as we come out of this pandemic and that we come out of this malaise and we're working to strengthen our economy. That would be a hit on Iowans.
What's the question?
How can you justify repealing the 2017 tax bill and it helped Iowans?
What I have said over and over again is that I want to make sure that we have a tax bill that works for hardworking middle-class Iowans. And that means taking provisions, and I've mentioned this before, a few of them within the tax bill that my opponent is talking about that benefit Iowans. There are some small business tax provisions in there that are good, not all of them. It certainly depends on how that business is structured. But the most important issue is to make sure that corporations and the wealthy pay their fair share. Over 80% of that tax policy went to putting more money back in the pockets of publicly traded companies, the largest among us and the wealthiest among us, the top 1%. That's absolutely unacceptable. It's created $2 trillion of debt for this country, something that our children are going to have to pay for. So when I put a tax bill together with my colleagues, it will be to support hardworking Iowa families and middle-class families across this country.
All right, thank you both for your answers on that question. We are nearing the end of our debate, and we're entering what we're calling the lightning round. These next questions only require a one-word answer or a very short explanation.
Representative Young, how do you plan to vote this year? Absentee, early in person, on Election Day?
On Election Day.
Okay, Representative Axne.
Join me tomorrow as I drop off my ballot along with my son, who will be voting for the very first time, and my husband. We're making this a family affair.
Representative Axne, legalize marijuana or not?
I think we need to move towards legalizing marijuana. We've certainly seen how it has helped us from a medical perspective. We need to make sure that we address any issues surrounding it to do it in a safe way. But what's happening right now is half our country has moved in that direction. The other half hasn't. It's not working. We need to find something that works for the entire country.
Congressman Young?
It's up to the states, but I wouldn't do it for recreational purposes, but for medicinal purposes only.
Okay, Congressman Young, name a few of the songs that are on your current playlist.
My current playlist, We Won't Get Fooled Again by The Who. Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. How's that?
Okay, classic rock guy. Congresswoman Axne, few songs on your current playlist.
Hey, Ready to Go by Republica. A little bit of Lenny Kravitz thrown in there. You know, I got a little rap in there. My boys are helping me out, picking out the Polo G. That's a good one right there. But I'll go classic back in the day too. Some Stevie Nicks, some Rolling Stones, and some AC/DC.
Okay, both of you, thumbs up or thumbs down, ranch dressing?
Oh.
Depends on what you're eating it with.
Always thumbs up on ranch dressing.
I'm a blue cheese person.
Congresswoman Axne, what is your favorite Olympic sport to watch?
Oh boy, there are so many, but I am a hockey mom and a hockey wife, so I'm going to have to go with hockey. So first and foremost, I don't get ribbed on by all the hockey wives out there, and it's just such a fun sport to watch.
Representative Young.
Having run track in high school and a year in college, and just being raised on the Drake relays, it's got to be track and field.
Okay, what's a go-to snack when you're on the road, Representative Axne?
Banana. It's easy to transport.
Popcorn.
Okay, Representative Young, what is your standard or favorite coffee drink?
Venti skinny vanilla latte.
Ooh, okay, Representative Axne.
Listen, I'm nothing fancy. I've been drinking black coffee with my mom since I was in 4th grade, and it never stunted my growth, so I'm going to stick with my black coffee.
Okay, what's your favorite season, Representative Axne?
Oh, right now, there is no more beautiful place in the country than Iowa in the fall, and so I'm happy as a clam when we have weather like this.
How about you, Representative Young?
This weather is perfect, and then driving around the district, seeing the leaves on the trees change, this is the time of year for me.
Okay, thank you for having a little bit of fun with us, both of you. And thank you very much for participating in tonight's debate. We appreciate it. We would like to let you have the final word this evening with your closing statements.
And a coin flip has determined that Representative Young will go first. Representative Young, you have 1 minute to give your closing statement.
Steve and Stephen and the audience here at KCCI, thank you very, very much for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity, 3rd District, for having served you for 4 years in the United States House of Representatives. There's a lot more to be done. We need to make sure that we grow this economy, protect health care, secure our borders, and make sure that we are the shining city on the hill that everybody is jealous of and emulates around the world. One thing's for certain, I know this district and this district knows me. For 4 years, every month, I went to every county, every month. And I never missed a vote in the United States House of Representatives. Unfortunately, my opponents missed many votes, and we have a great contrast on the issues of the day. I want you to keep more of your hard-earned dollars. My opponent wants to raise taxes. I don't want a public option that she wants, which is a slow drip to single-payer health care. I want to make sure that you and your doctor can decide on health care on your own. I'm asking for your support. I have a record of leadership, and I'm eager to lead for you again. I'm asking for your vote November 3rd.
Thank you very much, Representative Young. Representative Axne, your closing statement, please.
2 years ago, you all went to the ballot box and decided it was time for a change. And thank you so much for putting your trust in me to make sure that you had a voice in Washington. I wasn't named the most bipartisan member of our congressional delegation just for a naming convention. It's because I'll work with anybody to make sure that we get the job done for Iowans. I will stand up to my party when it's needed, unlike my opponent who sold us down the road on his health care vote. I will make sure that we fight hard for everything that working class families need. That means putting in a tax bill that supports hardworking middle class families. We need to make sure that we send somebody out to Washington, again, who can move forward to push forth an affordable plan for every single person to protect people with pre-existing conditions, keep kids on our plans till they're 26, and not raise premiums for people. And we need to continue to have a fighter. It takes a lot to represent a state like Iowa against the numbers of representatives from cities on the coast. I'm there to fight for you every step of the way. I thank you for your trust in me, and I look forward to representing you again.
Okay, thank you both, and we do want to let the audience know that it is clear to us that you both have respect for one another. By the way you greeted each other when you came into the studio tonight, that was very nice to see in this highly polarized environment that we are in right now. That concludes our debate, folks. We do want to remind you that we'll be back here on Thursday night with the candidates who are running for Iowa's U.S. Senate seat. We will again join the Des Moines Register, but also 2 more media partners to bring you a statewide debate between incumbent Senator Joni Ernst and her Democratic challenger, Teresa Greenfield. That debate begins at 6:30 on Thursday night, right here on KCCI. We thank you so much for joining us this evening for the 3rd Congressional District debate. Once again, thank you very much to the 2 candidates. Have a good evening and stay safe.